Let's get reaction to Lesufi's address. EFF's Gauteng chairperson, Nkululeko Dunga, is joining us now. Nkululeko, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. Sounds a little bit like a revival of the Erotropolis. I don't know if you're getting the same vibes of turning Ekurhuleni into a manufacturing of cars and aviation.
Well, thank you very much for having us. You know, after having been subjected to an hour and a half of a failed attempt for electioneering purposes, one can only draw conclusion that the outgone premier, and that Hendrik is aloof of the conditions of a province that he alleges to lead. And the reason why we say that is that he speaks of Ekurhuleni as though it has never been an industrial hub, and particularly a manufacturing center of the country that is. I mean, we are speaking of, and particularly in this case, the city of Ekurhuleni, which is known to be called actually the workshop of the country, which used to be very high in terms of engineering, very high in terms of its contribution, particularly in the sector of manufacturing, was at its highest, which led to a GDP contribution much more higher than the national average.
So what happened? I mean, I don't have to tell you, when you drive around Ekurhuleni, all those big factories are lying fallow. Max Steel, for example, is one of those big companies, steel engineering company that would have been part of Ekurhuleni. But when you drive around generally in Ekurhuleni, you find that all these places, the gates are closed.
Yeah, it's 30 years of existence of the ANC government. That's what happened, you know. There are no factories that would be built where there are no proper roads infrastructure. There are no factories that will be built where there is generally a poor health standard, particularly of potential employees. There are no factories that would ever be built in areas where the rate of crime is as high as it should be. You know, that just means that there would be a migration of potential industries to other areas where they seem or they feel to be much more safer, and there's a greater network, particularly of public transportation of the goods that they would be manufacturing. And that's in the crux of the failures of the ANC government for the past 30 years. I mean, the only attribute that of a success in the past 30 years that the outgone mayor, or Hendrik, could speak of was you know, the establishment of a township called Bramfisher. If you go to Bramfisher, the gender-based violence is extremely high, unemployment is at its highest, and it's an area that is built on a dolomitic land where there are sinkholes, and it's at the brink of collapse. Yet he stands and speaks of a glorified attempt of the outgoing government having established a township there.
So speaking of Bramfish and dolomitic lands, let's talk about illegal mining and how that has been, I suppose, not eradicated, but at least attempted to have some arrests from what we are hearing from the Premier. He says that the work that has been done in boosting SAPS's visibility, some 20,000, if I'm being correct, vehicles that would have been donated, or maybe less. There would have been some 12 mobile police stations, 250 high-powered, I beg your pardon, vehicles that have been donated, and you've got some 439 persons who were arrested for illicit mining activities, and some 79,000 joint operations that were carried out, and 9,244 arrests, and a recovery of 1,500 stolen hijacked vehicles. Are you saying all this amounts to nothing?
Of course it does, because when you look at the top 30 police stations or police areas that are mostly affected by either contact crimes or serious crimes in South Africa, about 14 or so of them actually come from Gauteng. The third quarter report in terms of crime and the crime stats have shown you that there's a serious increase in terms of violent crime. in Gauteng, with rape, contact crime being at its highest. That seeks to tell you that there's no turnaround strategy in terms of dealing with crime. He says something and contradicts himself. One, he says that the police have done extremely well. They've done a lot of donations in terms of the police force in itself. But the state of the province address ought to have addressed a program of action that he would have undertaken in the previous year. And he claimed that last year that he would actually do a donation of one vehicle per ward, which he had not done, because we are sitting at over 500 wards in Gauteng, with only about 250 vehicles that he speaks of. Does not speak of the number of vehicles that his Hendrik gang in green have actually damaged beyond repair, which has contributed significantly towards the finances of the state in itself at a provincial level. He speaks of no confidence in the South African police, but tries and exercise some form of patronage by acknowledging the work of the SAPS in Gauteng, but at the same time say that we are in need of the South African National Defence Force to actually come and do the work on behalf of the South African Police Services in terms of enforcing the law and providing a safety service. And, it's not something that the EFF would advance, more especially the existence of the South African National Defence Forces on our streets, because it just tells you that there's no confidence in the South African Police Services to actually administer the work, because South African National Defence Forces, they were never, trained to deal with the civil space and civil society, and theirs is to deal with war in predominantly. So this is bringing in over 1,000 of the Hendrik gang in green uniform, to come and just lead and clap hands inside a venue, speaks of a premier that is also not in touch with the ground, because if genuinely he believed that the Green Army that he has brought in is here to really fight crime and to make our streets much more safer, which, by the way, they are not properly equipped or trained to do legislatively, is that while they were sitting there clapping hands and wearing all berets and boots, someone was being raped in Gauteng. Someone was mugged. There were hijackings that were taking place, and small street that he speaks of remains as violent as it has ever been. Yet we have people who are sitting there clapping hands for Mr. Hendrik. If there was any logic towards a service to our people in ensuring that Gauteng is safe, they would have been out in the streets. It just tells you that it's a gimmick, it's an election gimmick by Hendrik, as hence every single thing that he says does not refer predominantly to the work that he has done, but refers to the work that he's yet to, and keeps referring to us on April Fool's Day, the 1st of April this, the 1st of April that, without any tangible outcomes of the year that was.
Let's talk about some of the program of action and what you think it would have achieved. I mean, one of the things that well, it hasn't been achieved, I suppose, at this point, but he is clapping for the president and the proclamation that South Africa's Post-Bank Amendment Act will allow the creation of a state bank. Now, capacity of state is something that the EFF has been pushing for, building the capacity of state, saying we'll have a state bank. But not only that, there are 11 clean audits that he is talking about, saying 14 departments achieved 100% compliance with 30 days pay 30-day payments to suppliers. 2 achieved 99%, and we're witnessing a steady improvement by the Department of Health. To date, we have empowered women, youth, and persons with disabilities. We spent close to 14.5 billion rands on enterprises owned by women, youth, and persons with disabilities. Not a feather in his cap?
Definitely not. You know, when you understand the fiscal framework of particularly provincial legislature and national government, which is completely different towards municipalities, is that these are appropriated funds, meaning that they get their allocation of funding the year before. And by the time that they formulate their budgets, they're able to execute them, and the monies are inside their accounts. They are not there to generate some form of income, unlike municipal governments, where your finances are based on the potential collection of revenue and the collection rate thereof, and still reliant as well on province and national government to give you the necessary grants to actually shoot up your fiscus for the municipality. So there's really no need to celebrate anything outside of conforming to the supply chain management policies of the legislature in themselves, in that in the main they do not offer service delivery, and they are not of service delivery orientation. And hence even the position of the EFF is to do away with provinces so that we can really have this money trickling down to municipalities where there are actually services that ought to be rendered. You know, if you are to genuinely ask, what is it that really economic development has done besides the giving of probably conditional grants through an exercise of patronage through ANC networks, is that it has not equated to the building of economies and townships. He was mentioning at some stage that over 15 billion that has been spent on localization of products. Really, genuinely, the people that matter, that are on the ground, that are actually engaged in local economy. Money that trickles down to...
All right, unfortunately, that line, they're letting us down, Nkululeko. We'll leave it there for now. The EFF Gauteng chairperson.